Hey guys, it's Brian the Brain Eason, also known as Bloody Face, and today, for my first ever YouTube video, I wanted to review the new Hearthstone set, the Boomsday project. So far, only 33 cards are out, but I think that's plenty for us to go over. Before we dive into it, I want to show you guys my 5-point scale that I'm going to be using to grade each individual card. So, at 5.0, we have powerful staples that are meta-defining. These cards tend to be seen in multiple different decks. They fit very easily. They're very powerful. Pretty much just broken in a word. These cards are like Dr. Boom and Loetheb. I chose not to include cards like Skull of Manorai and Shudderwock, which are very powerful, but they tend to only fit in certain kinds of deck rather than multiple different decks. Speaking of those cards, we have those graded at around 4.0. These are deck-defining staples. These are cards that can boost already existing archetypes or create new ones. For example, the Battlecry Shaman deck known as Shudderwock was never even a deck until Shudderwock came around. Demon Warlock wasn't really a deck until Skull came around, although we did get Gul'dan and Possessed Lackey around the same time, and all these cards kind of push the deck over the top, but Skull is one of the centerpieces of the deck. Of course, we have cards like Dustbreaker, which are just extremely powerful. Dragon Priest was a tier 1 deck for a long time. So these are going to be our 4.0 type cards. At 3.0, we have solid playables that tend to fit many different decks. These are cards that are good usually just on stats. For example, Serenite Chain Gang, Tar Creeper, Dire Maul, and even cards like Firefly. They're pretty solid. They're not broken, but they help boost the overall power level of some of the tier 1 and tier 2 decks that we see a lot. At 2.0, we have playable cards that are niche and fringe decks. For example, Dire Frenzy has seen play in Ooze Hunter, Greedy Sprite has seen play in Spiteful Druid, Phantom Militia has seen play in Quest Warrior, but these are cards that don't see very much play and they tend not to be very powerful. And then at 1.0, we have unplayable cards such as Magma Raider, Goldshire Footman, and Silverback Patriarch. These are cards that people do not want to play Constructed or Arena. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump in to our first card. So our first card is Omega Defender. It's a 4-mana 2/6 taunt, which already has pretty decent stats. Its battle cry says if you have 10 mana crystals, you gain 10 attack. And this is a cycle that's going to be seen throughout the new set. I think it's called Omega. So when you have 10 mana crystals, your average card turns into an extraordinary card. 10 and more attack completely changes this card. I think this card is pretty solid. I think it's going to see play in decks like Evenlock that want to power up a lot of big threats. But I don't think it's going to see play in a lot of decks. I think it's only going to be sort of niche into decks that are trying to get to the late game. So I give this guy a solid 3.0. Our next card is Spider Bomb. This is the first magnetic card that we'll be looking at. So when I analyze magnetic cards, I tend to compare them to cards like Blessing of Might, which is a 4-mana +4/+4 on a minion. It looks pretty powerful on the surface, but doesn't actually see very much constructed play. Now, magnetic is basically a less powerful version of that right off the bat, because you only can use magnetic cards on mech cards. But the other side of it is you can use mech cards to create minions. So I think some of these magnetic cards won't be as powerful placing on minions, but you do get added flexibility, and Spider Bomb's a pretty good example of that. So Spider Bomb's a 3-mana 2/2, that when it dies, you destroy a random enemy minion. I think it's pretty weak on its own. It is a Hunter card. I don't think this is a card that Hunter really wants to play with. Hunters tend to be more aggressive, or they tend to be more like Spell Hunter. So I'm going to give this guy a 2.0. He might see play in other fringe type decks, but I don't think he's going to see a whole lot of play. Our next card is Electra Storm Surge. 3-mana 3/3, your next spell this turn cast twice. This is a very powerful effect. You can use it alongside Healing Rain, you can use it alongside Lightning Storm, even Volcano if the board gets too out of control. I think it's going to only be played in Shudderwock Shaman right now, though. Right now, Shaman isn't really played in very many other archetypes. So for that reason, I'm going to give this guy a 3.0. It doesn't really fit in mid-range type Shaman decks because you don't really want to be casting small spells twice. You want to be casting big spells twice. And it's more of a controlling type card. but nonetheless, it's still pretty solid. Our next card up is Myra's Unstable Element. Now, this card just looks ridiculous. 5 mana, draw the rest of your deck. I mean, its card kind of speaks for itself. It's extremely powerful. It's definitely a build around card. Rogue also gets another card in the set, a 2 mana 3/2 that shuffles 3 more cards back in your deck. Um, there's already a deck forming there. I expect this card to be extremely powerful and will probably create its own deck. Think about a rogue deck that just wants to mill itself really fast. This is part of the reason why they probably cycled Cold Light Oracle into the Hall of Fame. This is a very scary card. I'm a little worried about its power level. Hopefully it won't need to be nerfed, but I'm very interested to see what kind of decks come out with this. So I'm going to give this card a solid 4.0. Next card up we have is Biology Project, another extremely powerful card. Now, I'm not a very big fan of this kind of design. 1 mana, both player gain 2 mana crystals. It's extremely powerful. This card's either going to be something that's not very good because of the symmetrical side of the effect, or it's just going to be absurdly broken because decks like Man and Ramp Druid are going to be able to abuse the 2 mana crystals that you gain from it. So I think this card, I'm going to give it a 4.0, and I think this card might end up getting nerfed. It's either going to be very good or just pretty mediocre. But right now, Druid has a lot of stuff going for it. There's already multiple different Druid archetypes, and also Druid still has cards like Ultimate Infestation, which are they just trump every other 10 drop. So for Druid, getting to 10 mana really fast is a very scary thing. Even though this effect is symmetrical, if Druid is playing Ultimate Infestation, you're just playing some random minions, it's not going to be very good for you. So I'm a little bit worried about this card. I hope it doesn't end up proving too broken. Next card up, we have Stargazer Luna. After you play the rightmost card in your hand, draw a card. This card seems pretty solid. Mages are always looking for more minions. I think the Tempo Mage deck right now is kind of struggling to find its identity. It lost Crystal Runner, so it has a little bit less synergy with Secrets, but it still has that very powerful early game and very powerful burn package. I think what that deck is lacking is minions, and this card might fit the bill. It's a 3 mana 2/4. It's not an extremely good body, but I think it's solid enough. Its effect is, I think its effect is powerful enough to warrant a spot in it. The Tempo Mage decks tend to be more burn oriented, playing cards like Arcane Missiles, even Mirror Image. This card could entice you playing even cheaper spells, which maybe makes Archmage Antonidas good again. I think this card's pretty solid. It probably won't see a lot of play in many different decks, but I think it will see play in Tempo Mage. So I'm going to give this guy a solid 3.0. Next up, we have Menacing Nimbus. 2 mana 2/2, add a random elemental to your hand. Don't think decks like Shudderwalk are going to want this card. I think maybe Even Shaman might want it. Even Shaman's already playing cards like Amani Berserker, which, in terms of power level, aren't very strong. They also run around cards that have elemental synergy, and this card might help them with that. They already run Earth and Might with only 4 to 6 elementals, and having a solid 2-drop that replaces itself, I think is going to be pretty good. A lot of the elementals are actually pretty solid as well. It's not like you're getting a random battle cry or random taunt. Elementals are pretty good, so I'm going to give this guy a 2.5. I think he's going to see play in Even Shaman. I'm not sure if Even Shaman will still even be a thing after this new expansion, though, given how powerful all these other cards are. Next up, we have Wargear, 5 mana 5/5 mech. And it's I think now's a good time to point out that if you were to go in your Hearthstone client and search for a mech right now, there are not a lot of mechs. There's like Harvest Golem, Scorpion Nomadic, but a lot of the mechs aren't that good right now. So every time you see a new mech, you need to have it kind of stand out in your head and realize that these are the cards that you're going to be putting Magnetic on. A 5 mana 5/5 with Magnetic is pretty good. I mean, it's pretty flexible. Just playing a 5 mana 5/5 by itself is good, but giving a mech +5/+5, it's almost like a better blessing. So I think this card's pretty solid. I think there's definitely going to be a mix of different mech decks. Mechs could even mix with even or odd. There's a lot of different ways mechs can go, and they're certainly going to be played and constructed. So I'm going to give this guy a solid 3.0. Definitely is reminiscent of cards like Serenite Chain Gang, which might not be super powerful, but can see play in a lot of different kinds of decks. Next up, we have upgradable framebot, 2 mana 1/5, but he's a mech, which is extremely important. This card is just basically going to be the bread and butter of any mech deck. Any deck that wants to do magnetic, or any deck that just wants to, like, have a solid curve. A 2 mana 1/5 is pretty solid. We've already seen cards like Druid of the Swarm, which was a 2 mana 1/5 taunt, see play and constructed before. There's no reason this guy won't see play either. I'm going to give him a solid 3.5. I think he's going to appear in a lot of decks, and I think thanks to him, mechs actually might be a viable strategy. Next up, we have Beryllium Nullifier, which is a 7 mana 3/8 with magnetic. Can't be the target by spells or hero powers. Now, this card is very powerful. Kind of reminds me of Sogoth, which is a 9 mana 5/9 taunt. Can't be targeted. This doesn't have taunt, but you do get to give whatever mech you want 8 extra toughness, which is huge. There aren't a lot of things that can clear, plus 8 toughness. It's usually going to be something that wipes the board, like a hard board wipe, like Psychic Scream or Twisting Nether. Also, giving it basically untargetable is extremely good. This card reminds me a lot of Bone Mare. Bone Mare used to be a 7 mana 5/5 they gave +4/+4. So it was a 9/9 across all the different stats. This card's a little bit less, but it does make up for that a little bit with the added can't be targeted by spells or hero powers. It's also, you have the option of just placing this down, and it's a pretty big threat. It's pretty hard to kill. I think it's pretty solid. I really hope Tempo Warrior is going to be a thing again, and this guy might help make Tempo Warrior, including the new Dr. Boom, which I'll get to next. Or not next, but in a little bit. Next up, we have Zilly Axe, which is a 5 mana 3/2 with 5 different abilities on it. It's got Magnetic, Divine Shield, Taunt, Lifesteal, Rush. Now, just play Zilly Axe on its own is a pretty okay card. 5 mana, deal 3 damage, and you get a 3/2, and you gain 3 life. I mean, that's already pretty solid just by itself. But being able to throw that down on a mech is going to be pretty good, especially if you pair it with the card we just saw. Actually, I'm not sure if you could do that. I guess you could put the 3/8 on Zilly Axe, but you couldn't put Zilly Axe. I'm not sure if Magnetic actually gets around the can't be targeted by heroes and spell. It probably does get around it, since the way Magnetic works is you just place it to the left of a mech and it just like attaches onto it. If that's the case, that's going to be pretty interesting. I'm going to give this guy a solid 3.5. I think he's going to appear in a lot of different decks. I don't think he's quite a 4.0, just based on power level. When we think of 4.0s, we think of Dustbreaker, Skull of Manorai, Twig of the World Tree. This card doesn't quite reach that power level, but I do think it's still pretty solid. Next up, we have Annoyotron. There's a 4 mana 2/4 with Divine Shield and Taunt. 4 mana 2/4 with Divine Shield Taunt is not bad. I think a few expansions ago, we had Psychotron, which is a 5 mana 3/4 Divine Shield Taunt. And while that did not see any play, it was solid in Arena. This card's basically a better version of that. Having 1 less mana for 1 less power is definitely an upgrade, and the Magnetic's pretty good too. I don't think this card is going to see a whole lot of constructed play. There is a little bit of incentive for Paladins to be playing mech with their new legendary spell, which I'll get to soon. So I'm going to give this guy a 2.0. He may see play in the mech Paladin, but more than likely he's not going to be super powerful. Next up, we have Super Collider. It's a 5 mana 1/3 weapon with a very interesting effect. Whenever you attack a minion, it forces it to attack one of its neighbors, presumably randomly. I think this card on the surface looks pretty good. It can theoretically clear 2 minions for the price of 5 mana, but I think if it is playable, it's going to be somewhat easy to play around, and also it's not able to hit face. And there's also the concern that Warrior has other weapons like Blood Razor and Woe Cleaver, and you don't want to overload the Warrior deck with too many weapons. I think this card is solid in a meta where a lot of the decks are tempo oriented, so they're playing stuff on curve like 2, 3, 4. But against decks that aren't very tempo oriented, this card's going to be pretty weak. So I'm going to give it a 2.5. I think it might see some fringe play, and I think it's a little bit better than a niche card, but I don't expect it to see very much play. Oh boy. Next up we have Flute, which is a 4 mana 3/4. Stat wise, pretty underwhelming, but its effect more than makes up for it. While it's in your hand, this is a 3/4 copy of the last minion played. I'm just going to go ahead and say it. I think this is the best card that's been revealed thus far. I mean, this effect is just absolutely ridiculous. The fact that it doesn't matter what turn you played your last minion on, I'm a little bit worried about this card, guys. The fact that you can just drop Malygos for tempo and throw out your Moonfires, and then next turn play your Flute and then play your swipes, it makes Malygos Druid very powerful. No longer do you need to even rely on Twig for your combo. You have this guy. It's also good in Mill Druid. You know, you can recopy your Togwaggle. You can go ahead and play your Togwaggle, and then you can play Togwaggle, Innervate Azalina the turn after that. You know, eliminating the need for Twig. I mean, right now, the thing that's keeping these Druid decks in check is that you can kill the Twig, and even though you can kill the Twig, they have a decent plan B. Well, now they have a plan C, and now this card's actually really plan A. Twig is more like plan B. This card is very, very good, and I'm actually a little bit worried about it. I'm kind of hoping that it gets nerfed into it's only 3/4 copy last when you played this turn. I think that'd be a lot more reasonable than what it is right now. So I'm going to give this guy 4.5. I think he's borderline meta defining and is also going to boost the power level of a lot of different Druid decks. Next up we have Wizbang the Wonderful. Although I'm not sure if it's really fair to call him wonderful because his effect is very underwhelming. You start the game, you get one of Wizbang's wonderful decks. And I think it's already been confirmed that one of the random decks is going to be a deck recipe. And a deck recipe should be worse than the deck that you're playing. I think this is a pretty interesting free-to-play. You know, if you're free to play and you just want to be able to play with different deck recipes and you just want to have fun, I think this is a great casual card. But for competitive play, this is never going to see play unless you're, you know, memeing. And then you're really not trying to win, you're just trying to meme. So this is just a 1.0, unfortunately, although it is a very, very fun card. Next up, we have Tenderologist. 2 mana, 2/3. If you control a treant, discover a spell. The treant theme is a little bit underwhelming. We've already seen the 2 mana add 3 treants to your hand, which isn't that great. I think the best thing you can do with that is play an early Mountain Giant. I don't really expect treants to be a thing. I'm not really sure why they're pushing it. I guess maybe it's for Arena. Discovering a spell is pretty good, but I don't think it's worth putting cards that generate treants in your deck. So I'm going to give this guy a 1.5. I don't think treants are even going to be a deck. I think he's a little bit worse than Niche and a treant deck. I just don't think treant decks are even a thing. Speaking of treants, we have Landscaping. I mean, this is an okay treant effect. 3 mana summon 2 2/2s. I think you'd rather have 3 mana for a 3/4 than 2 2/2s. 2 2/2s is just pretty underwhelming. And the thing with the treants is, what are you even trying to do with them? Are you trying to be aggressive? Are you trying to be defensive? It doesn't really make very much sense. I think treants would rather be aggressive and play cards like Savage Roar, but this card's just kind of underwhelming. Especially with all the stuff that Druid has right now. I think if you want to be playing Druid, you want to be playing stuff like Malygos or Togwaggle or even Taunt Druid. So I'm going to give this one 1.5 as well. And next up we have Mulch Muncher, another treant card. 10 mana 8/8 with Rush, costs 1 less for each friendly treant that died this game. This card is also pretty underwhelming, at least it's a mech. Maybe if more treant support comes out, maybe aggro treants can become a thing. I think this is one of the better payoff effects, so I think because of that, I'll give it a 2.0. But, you know, I'm still not really feeling the whole treants. Alright, finally on to a non-treant card. We have Kangaroos Endless Army. Resurrect 3 friendly mechs. They keep any magnetic upgrades. This is one of the most powerful mech cards that have been spoiled so far. If you remember Anything Can Happen, that card was basically a 1-card OTK. It was 10 mana, and you did get to play charged minions, and right now I don't think any mechs have charge, but you do get pretty good value. The only way you're really going to answer this card is with hard board wipes like Psychic Scream and Twisting Nether, but the downside is this card does kind of force you to play a committed Mech Paladin deck, which I'm not really sure what it looks like right now. I think Mech Paladins want to be kind of mid-range aggro-ish. But I think if you're playing Paladin, you want to just be playing Odd Paladin just because it's probably more efficient. But as we see more and more mechs come out, we'll keep an eye on this card, and this card could go up. So I'm going to give it a 3.0 for right now. Next up, we have a Deadbringer. 2 mana, 2/1 with Death Rattle. When it dies, you get a Death Rattle from your deck. This card reminds me a lot of Loot Hoarder. It's basically the exact same stats, but instead of drawing a random card from your deck, you draw a Death Rattle minion. I think the most obvious inclusion of this card goes in Death Rattle Priest, and probably doesn't go anywhere else. Although in Death Rattle Priest is pretty solid. It has a way to get out the 40/40 pretty early. It's got cards like Twilight's Call, which are pretty powerful. So getting an additional 2 mana Death Rattle I think is pretty good. Right now you have Loot Hoarder, Plated Beetle, and now you have Deadbringer. So I think this card's pretty good. I'm going to give it a 2.5. I don't think it's quite 3.0 because it only fits in Quest Priest. I don't think it's quite 2.0 because I think it's a little bit more than niche. I think it might be core to Quest Priest now. So I think a 2.5 is pretty solid. Speaking of Death Rattle Priest, we have Reckless Experimenter, which is a 5 mana 4/6. Death Rattle minions you play cost 3 less but die at the end of the turn. This card does have potential for combos. Maybe you do want to actually kill your Death Rattles. I took a quick look through all the Death Rattles that are out right now. There's the Coffin guy, the 6 mana 6/5, when he dies summons another Death Rattle. Maybe there's some interaction there. But right now, the Death Rattles are kind of underwhelming when you pair them with Reckless Experimenter. Maybe you just want to jam a bunch of Death Rattle minions out really fast, but I'm not really sure why you would want to do that. This card might actually have some combos, but I wasn't able to find any just looking through. So I'm going to give it a 2.0 right now. Next up, we have Faithless Gloomy. 1 mana 1/1, give a friendly mech +1/+1. So this is the exact type of card that mechs really need. Mechs really need cheap mechs that can start, generating a decent board and can start generating aggression, because these mech decks aren't going to be very powerful in the late game. They're going to be competing against decks like Togwaggle Druid, Mally Druid, even Warlock, Shudderwalk Shaman. These decks have, just incredible end games that just cannot be beat by mid-range decks. So these mech decks really need to be aggressive, and they need to put on the pressure. And I think Faithful Lumi, while it doesn't seem like it really puts on the pressure, 1 mana for basically 2/2 worth of stats is very good. So basically just going to be on the lookout, see if there's any more 1-drop mechs. It's kind of underwhelming that, there's not really any other ones right now. But, I think for right now, I'm going to give this a solid 3.5. I think it could elevate the mechs to where it needs to be. But I don't think it's quite powerful enough to call it deck defining. Next up, we have Omega Agent, 5 mana 4/5 that if you have 10 or more mana crystals, summon 2 copies of it. This card's pretty underwhelming. I think for what Warlock wants to do, Warlock already has like really good late game with Gul'dan, cube, recursiving with the cubes, and even Locke just wants to play giant threats every turn. Usually they want to play Hooked Reavers around the time they're getting close to 10 manas. But yeah, this card doesn't really fit into even Warlock. It doesn't really fit into Cube Warlock. It doesn't really fit into Zoo Warlock either. This card just doesn't really have a home besides maybe Arena. Unfortunately, I think this card is going to be a 1.5. I think it's borderline unplayable, but it might see some play in maybe some fringe decks. Next up, we have Lab Recruiter. 2 mana 3/2 that shuffles 3 copies of a friendly minion into your deck. So basically, this is a gang up on a creature. 2 mana 3/2 in the early game is pretty good. I think this card's going to have a bigger impact in Wild than it will in Standard. Obviously, you want to pair this with Cold Light Oracle more than anything else. And what did we just lose? We just lost Cold Light Oracle. This card might have a place in Kingsbane Rogue, maybe Looping Shiny Finders, although Kingsbane Rogue already has a pretty decent way to prevent itself from fatiguing. Especially with the new Myras, I think there might be some fast Kingsbane milling action going on. But right now we don't have the card draw that we need to pair with this. There's no Cold Light Oracle. There's just Shiny Finder right now. So I don't think it's going to be that good. I'm just going to give this a 2.0 for right now in Standard, and probably a 3.0 in Wild. Even though I'm not really grading wild cards, it's just pretty obvious that this guy's good in wild. Next up, we have a card that's pretty funny, Weaponized Pinata. I like the flavor of this card. It's just very colorful. It's also a pretty solid card as well. 4 mana, 4/3. It's a mech, and when it dies, add a legendary minion to your hand. So right off the bat, this card kind of reminds me of Piloted Shredder, which is also 4 mana, 4/3 mech. But when Piloted Shredder dies, you got a random 2-drop in play. Random 2-drop in play is probably a little bit better than getting a random legendary minion in your hand, especially considering a lot of legendary minions are kind of underwhelming, like Lore Walker Cho and Tinkmaster Overspark and stuff like that. But I do think this guy is still pretty good. I think this guy fits what mechs want to be doing, which mechs are kind of a early game, somewhat tempo-based aggro deck, and Weaponized Pinata is a pretty good play on turn 4 and helps keep the gas up, helps keep your hand full. You know, it's a decent thing to put magnetic stuff on, so I'm going to give this guy a 3.0. I think he's going to be a staple in most mech decks. Next up, we have a pretty interesting card, Demonic Project. 2 mana. Each player transforms a random minion in their hand into a random demon. Yeah, so this card right off the bat just doesn't look very good, but the real purpose of this card is just to be another Dirty Rat effect. If you don't remember Dirty Rat's a 2 mana 2/6 that pulls a random minion from your opponent's hand. And the reason why Dirty Rat was good wasn't because of its stats. It was because it was able to pull certain combo pieces out that prevented your opponent from winning the game. So right now in Standard, we don't have any Dirty Rat effects. So there's really no great way to combat stuff like Shutterwalk. Demonic Project is a pretty scary card for Shutterwalk to play against. So, if you transform their Shutterwalk, the game's just going to end on the spot. If you transform their Grumble, the game's probably going to end on the spot. If you transform their Zola, it's even still pretty good. Even hitting a Sernite Chain Gang's pretty good. The problem is you have to play this card in your deck, and this card is just not very good unless you really, really want that Dirty Rat effect. I expect this card to see play in tournaments where you're trying to counter certain lineups, and I think this adds an interesting element to tournaments. It makes Shutterwalk maybe a little bit more risky, but I think overall it's not a super strong card. I'm going to give it a 2.5. I think its niche is, just the Dirty Rat effect, but I do think it is powerful enough to, deserve a little bit higher than a 2.0. Next up, we have Unexpected Results. 4 mana, summon 2 random 2-cost minions, and improve by spell damage, which I'm assuming just means they both get a +1 spell damage. This card's pretty solid. I think, I already spoke about Tempo Mage needing more minions, and this is basically another way to generate more minions for Tempo Mage. Also makes cards like Arcane Missiles and Cinderstorm better. Yeah, I mean, this card's pretty solid. I think it deserves a solid 3.0. I don't think it's fantastic or anything. There is a little bit of liability that comes attached to it. Summoning a random Doomsayer is going to be pretty bad. But I think overall, the stats that you're usually going to get about a River Crocolisk, I think, out of it. So 2 River Crocolisk for 4 mana, both improved by spell damage, is pretty good. It's definitely above average. So I give this a 3.0. Next up, we have Dr. Boom Mad Genius. Yeah, you can't really create this set without making a throwback for Dr. Boom. If you haven't seen the hero power, sorry I don't have them up right now. They're all super powerful. So this guy, when it comes down, he immediately gains you 7 armor. The battle cry, your mechs have rush, isn't going to be too relevant. I think the main reason you're going to play this card is for its hero power. I'll quickly kind of go over some of them off the top of my head. There's a 2 mana summon 3 random 1/1, or sorry, 2 mana summon 3 1/1 boombots. 2 mana deal 1 damage to all enemies. 2 mana gain 7 armor. 2 mana deal 3 damage. And 2 mana discover a mech. And these hero powers are going to change each turn. All these hero powers are very good, and they're a strict upgrade for what warriors are already playing, which is gaining 2 armor is not very exciting. So I think this card is very, very, very good. I think this probably makes Warrior Mech one of the #1 mech decks out right now. But I don't think this is going to see inclusion in decks like Taunt Warrior or Recruit Warrior. It may. I mean, we've seen Stormlord Garrosh seen playing those, and you're really just playing it for the weapon and the hero power. There's no reason Dr. Boom won't be played. This card could easily be played in every Warrior deck, but it's definitely going to be the most powerful in the mech deck for its tempo and its busted hero power. So this guy's going to get a solid 4.5. 4.5 may seem a little bit high, but I think this definitely pushes the power level of mechs to the next level. And next up we have Auto Defense Matrix. 1 mana Paladin Secret. When one of your minions is attacked, give it Divine Shield. This card's just not very exciting. It's just another card you can get off Hydrologist. I mean, it's pretty good for Hydrologist. Just makes things trickier for your opponent. But a lot of times, when you're playing around Paladin Secrets, you're going to be playing around Redemption already. And playing around Redemption already kind of plays around Auto Defense Matrix. You're usually going to be attacking their weakest minion. So buffing your weakest minion to give it Divine Shield is not very good. So this card's pretty underwhelming. I don't expect it to actually see play in a constructed deck, but I think it might be chosen off a Hydrologist every now and then. So I'm going to give it a 1.5. And next up we have Omega Medic. 3 mana 3/4. If you have 10 mana crystals, restore 10 health to your hero. This is an extremely powerful effect for a pretty decently sized body. 3 mana 3/4 in the early game is nothing to sneeze at. And also in the late game, gaining 10 health is nothing to sneeze at either. Priests are already playing Divine Hymn, which do have the added benefit of more Shard Cleric plus Wild Pyromancer combo. This guy's already pretty good in the early game. It's going to be pretty good in the late game. I'm not really sure where its home is going to be. Probably not in Combo Priest, because in Combo Priest you just want to be killing your opponent. I'm not really sure about it being played in Control Priest either, because in Control Priest we already have a lot of tools. We already have big dragons, we already have board wipe, we already have heal. I'm not sure if we really need more heal, but I think this card is powerful enough that it will find a home, so I'm going to give it a 3.0. Next up we have Astro Mr. 7 mana 5/5 that summons a random minion with cost equal to your hand size. This card's also kind of an awkward card that's not really going to find a home. It's not quite powerful enough for Big Spell Mage to want. Big Spell Mage threats are more game ending, like Lich King and Dragon Caller Alana, Sindragosa. Astromancer is more of a tempo card. I think stats-wise, this card is very powerful. You think of cards like Bone Mare, which were 7 mana 5/5, and they gave +4/+4. This is also a 7 mana 5/5, and I think it will usually generate more than 4 points worth of value. So I think this card might see play in Tempo Mage. Tempo Mage is a little bit awkward to build right now. You're having some more of these mid-range threats. You still have a Luna, so you want to run more burn, but now there's these more minions. But I do think there will be some sort of Tempo Mage deck that emerges, and I think Astromancer will probably find a place in it. I think it deserves between 2.5 3.0, so I'll go ahead and give it a 3.0. I think it's pretty powerful. On the other side of the spectrum, we have Celestial Emissary, 2 mana 2/1. Your next battle cry this turn is +2 spell damage, your next spell this turn is +2 spell damage. It's an elemental. I think that's the best thing you can say about this card. Is very, very, very underwhelming. You compare it to something like Cobalt Geomancer, which is a 2 mana 2/2 and has irradiating +1 spell damage every turn. This one only gives you +2 spell damage this turn, so you already have to spend 2 mana on it, which is already undesirable. You can't really play it on turn 2. It has 1 toughness. Card's very bad. Don't think it's good in arena. Don't think it's good in constructed. It's just a 1.0, I think. I think it's unplayable. And next up we have a Cloning Device. 2 mana discover a minion in your opponent's deck. Yeah, I think this guy's a little bit overwhelming as well. You usually don't really care about what minions your opponent is running. I guess that's good if your opponent's playing a lot of heavy threats in the late game. I think this is mostly an arena card. I think it's pretty good in arena. I think in arena you just want to have more and more big threats, and copying one of your opponent's big threats in their deck is going to be good. But in constructed, there's really no room for this, so it's going to get a 1.0 in constructed. And it looks like we're back to the beginning. Alright, so it looks like we've already made it through all 33 cards. So I'm just going to go ahead and show you the extra card that I saw on Twitter while making this video, because I think it's worthy of mention, which is a Giggling Inventor. 5 mana 2/1, summon 2 1/2 mechs with Taunt and Divine Shield. This card's crazy. The stats that you get off of it are really freaking good. Annoyotron back in the day was a 2 mana 1/2 Taunt Divine Shield, pretty much exactly what this thing summoned, and that card saw play. You get 2 of those, and you also get a 2/1, all for 5 mana, all in a single card. 1/2 Divine Shields are also great for building Magnetic. This card's going to make it very tough for your opponent to kill you. This is a very great defensive threat. Reminds me a lot of Sludge Belcher. I think this card's very good. In fact, it's probably one of the best cards that we've revealed so far. I think it's going to continue to push mechs to the next level. It's going to continue to push, mechs. It seems like mechs have gotten they're reaching the critical mass of cards that they need to start being a pretty good tempo-oriented deck. And Giggling Inventor is definitely going to help a lot with this. This is going to be a staple. So I'm going to give this a 4.0. Very powerful. So now that we've gone through all the cards, I thought it'd be cool to review the top 5 cards that we saw for part 1. Here we have Flute, of course, at number 1. As I mentioned earlier, extremely good in Malygos, extremely good with Togwaggle Druid. Dr. Boom, probably going to see play in almost every warrior deck, but it's going to be especially powerful in Mech Warrior. We have Biology Project, which just continues to just push the power level of Druid, which I'm not a very big fan of. Druid is already extremely powerful. I don't like seeing cards like Biology Project. I'm a little bit worried about it. This card might end up being the best card in the set, or it might end up being pretty mediocre, but definitely keep an eye out for it. We also have Myra's Unstable Elemental. 5 mana, draw the rest of your deck. This card just screams, build around me. I think it's going to be an easy fit in Kingsbane Rogue. I'm not sure what else kind of rogues it is, but it's a pretty fun, exciting card. Extremely powerful. And last but not least, the card we just saw, Giggling Inventor. Summon 2, 1/2, Divine Shield, taunts. Just so good. Just so many stats. This card just screams pure value. I think what we've seen a lot from the mechs are it's going to be hard to run them out of cards. I think they're going to be a pretty solid mid-range deck that might not be super fast, but once they kind of get the ball rolling, they will sort of amass this tempo and this kind of push that they're going to need to take the game over the top. So I'm interested to see where mechs go. I think they're going to be pretty solid. So yeah, that's going to be it for part 1. I'll post part 2 in a few days. I'm gonna allow some time for more cards to pile up on the reveal. I think right now we're 33 out of 150. So I'm going to try and do about 30 cards at a time just so we can do a sizable video. But thank you everybody for watching. Again, this is my first YouTube video, so let me know if you liked it. I'm going to try and keep making more videos. I'm going to keep trying to make good content. Feel free to subscribe, all that junk. And I'll see you guys for the next video. Peace.